Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for tuning in and listening. We got Larry on board tonight with all the news that he's been able to collect, and we're going to look at a lot of different things. And of course, we have the tomorrow date of 9/23 coming up, and I believe I haven't been able to totally vet it, but I think tomorrow at Central Time or Central Daylight Time at about 10 o'clock in the morning is when Israel closes down the Feast of Trumpets, and that's when they would enter their, I believe, their 9/23. Or are they? They're not in 23 yet, though, are they, Larry? I don't think so. I think they're still 22.
Well, they're ahead of us, so I would think that probably they're right at
coming up on it.
Yeah, their new day starts. Remember at dark.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if there's anything to any of this. Let's start with little Kimmy, our little firecracker missile man, and he's been issuing some rather nasty comments about Trump, and of course Trump is responding. So it seems like the rhetoric is once again getting up to a fever pitch. Are they trying to goad Kim into making a mistake, do you think?
Well, it's very possible. Some interesting stuff came out today, of course. We'd had the reports earlier on Fox News and other channels that after the enhanced sanctions, I guess what you could call them, were applied, and China actually moved on their banks to stop North Korean loans, etc. A new North Korean threat has emerged now. They're threatening to test a hydrogen bomb in the Pacific Ocean, which is really a game changer, is the way they're saying. And of course, that escalates tensions. And I heard, I believe it was James Woolsey on earlier on Fox talking, and he said, well, what would that do to the power grids of South Korea and Japan and some other nations if they set this off? Even not on North Korean soil, but off in the ocean. What would that actually do? And would that also cause a local EMP, which would, that could really do damage to our fleets, and also, Japan and South Korea and their militaries at the same time. It's something to think about. And matter of fact, he actually said, look at Puerto Rico. He says the U.S., though seemingly unconcerned, is maybe one EMP away from being Puerto Rico.
Oh, really? Well, that would tend to confirm then that those satellites that are coming up and over America twice a day are probably EMP devices. He could trigger them anytime he feels like.
Well, there's one interesting thing that came up, and I thought of you when they said it, actually. I believe it was Mattis made a tongue slip and talked about a kinetic weapon. You remember him saying that?
No, I didn't hear that part.
Okay, yeah. He actually, they said, what would we do if, we were provoked into having to respond to a North Korean threat? And Mattis made I think it was a slip anyway. He mentioned a kinetic weapon, and they had a pretty full report today out on the Internet talking about what he really was talking about was just exactly what you mentioned probably weeks ago, was a electromagnetic particle beam weapon from a satellite.
Yeah. I know the movie, I can't think of it, but Steven Seagal was in it. and
Undersea 2.
Yes, and they had a satellite named Glazer 1 or Glazer 2, and it was literally a particle beam weapon. And there have been reports that you remember when China had a couple of their, well, they called them fertilizer plants, but whatever they were, they kind of got annihilated.
I remember that.
A couple of years ago.
There was some intel that was secret weapons facilities where they were making secret weapons.
Yes, and that's exactly what that movie talked about. They said, in fact, the madman behind all of this said, well, everybody thinks it's a fertilizer plant, but we know it isn't, and they know it isn't. and that's what they took out. And it makes you wonder what these movies are telling us. You know, it's like you emailed me the movie. What is it? Travelers. I think it is.
You're talking about Passengers.
Passengers, yes. Everything is in there. 923, 120 years to travel to this planet. It's almost like they're trying to tell the world something, and the world's not listening. And, of course, they always do all this stuff through the movies. That's one of their favorite ways. And, of course, it's like the Terminator series. Practically every door he walks into has a 923 on it. So it makes you wonder exactly what they're trying to put across. But getting back to our mystery man, Kim, if he's talking about a hydrogen bomb in or under the water, then what he's talking about is a tsunami device.
Well,
and do you suppose he would try that on Guam? I don't think I'd bother with Guam myself.
Yeah, here's what's interesting, Stuart. It depends on where if he does set it off. In other words, if somehow he can mount it on a missile, if he detonates it in the atmosphere, you got EMP to worry about, and there's no telling how far that would reach.
Yes.
Electric grid and technology damage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if he detonates it after it hits the water underwater, would that be a tsunami weapon? We've even had movies of tsunami weapons by explosion, remember?
Yes. In fact, Augusto said he saw something out in the Atlantic. He couldn't say it was an impact, couldn't say it was a bomb, just that the water was very roiled and looking funny, and then all of a sudden the tsunami develops that takes evidently a good share of the East Coast out. And what's kind of interesting about Kimmy Boy's threat, now this is the second or third one he's made about an EMP weapon and also some sort of a, he did the hydrogen bomb. Now he's talking about a tsunami weapon. He's either watching a lot of movies or this is part of the script. And you remember the rabbi who said it was North Korea that was going to start all this, which was really confirming what Dr. Ed Dames, Dr. Doom, talked about, how Kimmy would ignite a nuke or hydrogen bomb in anger.
That's
and
right.
That would start things going down the tubes.
And not only that, but he also linked to the North Korean explosion, the nuke explosion, he claimed was a precursor, a warning for the coming very soon of the series of kill shot events.
Yes, and we have had that. What did we have? 8 or so, or a combination of M-class and X-class flares. And I guess that sunspot is still acting up, isn't it? Only on the far side?
It's circling around the other side now, but it'll come back around. And it threw off a lot of M's, and then it threw off 3 X's, and one of them was an X8, and that's the one where they were shocked. And Space Weather and NOAA reported it, that the radiation actually reached the surface of the planet. It was not stopped by the magnetosphere, the atmosphere at all,
So if we have a major flare, which can come instantly at any time, it's kind of interesting when you look at all this in relationship to the 9/23 date that all the movies indicated was, 1, the rapture of the church, or the vanishing, however you want to word it, Hoover Dam breaking, all kinds of bad stuff, and tsunamis coming in on New York. All those movies were in there. So it just kind of makes you wonder what the Lord really does have in mind because of the star sign. Now, you can't just take the star sign all by itself, but when you couple it with all the other information that we have on it, people really should take note of this, because once this thing actually goes down, I guess it's all over, isn't it, for our modern lifestyle, whether the church is here or not here. It doesn't matter. Everything's going to change.
Well, it's very interesting, Stuart. You look at the 923 actually is a sign, and I take it as a sign. And of course, I know the media has built up the end of the world and blah 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 and all kind of stuff, and I don't expect any of that actually. But in the days following the sign itself, humanity has never had so much on its plate at one time as it faces now, because we have ignition points all over the planet right now, and any of them could go nuclear, almost any of them. So, and it's everything. Everything is ramping up, the volcanoes, the earthquakes, everything that does humanity not a lot of good seems to be operating right now. And we've never had weather like we're seeing the last number of weeks, and we're not through. They're talking about Maria, who's still a Category 3 hurricane, moving up and joining with Jose, and then hammering the northeast coast up there. And I saw off Mexico, they've got another one going, and there's 2 more out in the Caribbean, and they're saying that the Gulf of Mexico is hot and ready for another storm to begin to build. And by the way, Stuart, I went to the California news today. Grudge had it on his headline. Huge snowfalls coming, in the high regions of California a month or 2 months early, and that just joins right in with all the snowfalls in Montana, Idaho. We're getting a lot of cold weather soon.
Yeah, right now here, where we are in Wisconsin, it was around 95 degrees, 96. It was really hot, but only like a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, it was down almost to freezing. And the plants seem all confused, and that is part, really, of the Book of Enoch's statements about the days of the sinners, which would be Daniel's 70th week. And it kind of says that that's when the moon kind of goes berserk. Then we have the plants, the trees, the fruit trees, and all of that get all confused. And did you see that thing on YouTube about watching the bees?
Yeah.
That they aren't preparing for winter at all?
It's unexplainable. And it links in, Stuart, I know you've read the book Second Esdras before. there's a lot of that also chimes in on what we're seeing, you know, just like the Book of Enoch.
Yeah. People are in denial. They don't want this to be real, so therefore it isn't. They don't want it to be here, so it isn't here. And this thing sneaks up. I think that's one of the things that the Lord was trying to put across. Look, this thing is going to come, number one, at a time probably no one expects or very few expect. Let's say the rapture actually did occur tomorrow. How many people would actually expect that to happen? And in relationship to the total population of the planet, it'd be so far beneath even 1%, it'd almost be a minus number. Because that's kind of like the way it was in the days of Noah. I mean, they were kind of mocking Noah, I'm sure, saying, oh, well, you know, it's never rained before. What are you talking about? Are you nuts? But when the first raindrops began to fall, I think they changed their tune pretty fast. Not to say that the rapture will happen tomorrow, but when you analyze all of the stuff that's been going on and pointed out, here are just a few of them, just to remind everybody. 2017 is exactly 120 years from 1897, when they convened the first Jewish Congress. 2017 is exactly 100 years from 1917, when General Allenby retook Jerusalem. 2017 is exactly 70 years from 1947, when the United Nations ended the British mandate over the Holy Land. 2017 is exactly 50 years from the 1967 Six-Day War, which restored the city of Jerusalem and the West Bank to the nation and the people of Israel. And, of course, the United Nations hates that concept and has been trying to stop that. 2017 is the year 5777 on the Jewish calendar. 777 is the number, the Bible number, the exceeding fullness of, and the, you know, it's over, done, complete. Our readers aware that the father of Noah was 777 years of age, I guess, when the flood came. I didn't know that. Is that true?
That may be right. Yeah.
So, and then we have Donald Trump, that he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days when he took over the reins of his presidency. So we've got all kinds of things going on that are pointing to something. And I think people are, I'm not sure how to word it, because I'm not sure what's really going on. But let me word it this way. How many signs or how many clues would you, as a detective, a police detective, which you were for years, how many clues would it take for you to be convinced that Joe Smith down the road actually was the one who murdered his wife? He wouldn't confess it. He said he didn't do it, blah, blah, blah.
Or it wouldn't take too many. Once a few of them begin to point in his direction, I'd follow the trail.
Should we do the same thing here? Should we be following the trail?
Well, it makes sense. But that's, of course,
it does.
That's not politically correct, though. It only makes sense, and they don't do that.
Yeah, I suppose. But we do have an awful lot of gainsayers out there, and they're being very nasty, I think. They're not being very polite about it. And it's almost like when Scotty, who's talked to Stan Dale, by the way, a number of times, I guess, or at least once, and I guess they had a debate over this thing, and And I, for one, do agree with Stan that the odds are that the rapture of the church should be or right at when the Daniel 7 days week starts. That doesn't make it right. That's an interpretation of Scripture, and that, I guess, is where the big arguments are coming from. Is how they interpret what they're reading. But I made the point, Lot. The angels came in and said to Lot, "You better get out of here, because there's going to be a sudden destruction of where you're living." And he was really kind of reluctant, and his family wouldn't go at all, other than his wife and two daughters. And his wife turned around and got nailed for that. So would you not say that's almost bordering on a denial or normalcy? I think what we're dealing with here, in a way, is that we are, we've lived all our lives in what we could call normalcy. We get up, we have our rituals, we go to work, blah, blah, whatever it is we're doing, we have a ritual, a normal ritual. And we don't want that changed, nor can we conceive of such a massive change that the rapture might entail. And so I'm wondering if this is, I'm curious what you would think about that maybe that's one of the things that is causing all this gainsaying by the other people that don't agree with it.
Well, you brought up a lot, and of course there's a lot around us, if you know what I'm saying. And remember, it was Abraham, and that kept covenant pretty much with the Creator, and that actually, the Creator, came to him, in the form of the three that arrived, and told him what they were about to do, and then he interceded for Lot. Lot didn't know what was coming. Lot was not watching. Right. Lot, and I think what we're looking at is just what you said. I think that humanity gets acclimated to its surroundings and goes blind and deaf, for all I know, like the three monkeys, you see no evil, hear no evil, blah, 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 blah. And so that really in America, we've become acclimated, including the church, pretty much to our surroundings, and that just opens the door for denial. I can see where unbelief can just sneak in so easy because we don't have any kind of spiritual guard up generally anymore as a people.
Mm-hmm. So, having said that, the Lord then could present a whole bunch of signs, and we'd look at it and we'd say, well, yeah, maybe. Not sure, but it could be. And that's really, I guess, where we're at. But then didn't Jesus make the comment that when I return, will there be any faith left on the earth? And, of course, the answer was no.
Well, to go along with that, Stuart, you remember the August 21st eclipse sign. You remember what I had posted where a lot of the Native American elders were saying that they were awed by this and that they were going to go in their homes and just pull the curtains and shut the doors and write it out as a spiritual event. They were, there seems to be the Native Americans even, and it's not all of the Native Americans, but just the ones that follow the traditions, and I think a lot of Native American peoples seem to have a ability to see beyond just the natural they're looking at, and so. But in America, did you hear anything in America of anything such as the Native Americans were proclaiming on the internet? Did you hear the so-called population of America doing anything spiritual about it, or did you even hear them being concerned about it? Or have you read, what was the last day you read the word repentance in the newspaper, ever, or heard it on TV, ever?
I think
or
probably
maybe even
before.
Heard it or maybe even heard it in a church service, ever.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like probably the last time that it was said was long before I was born. I don't know. It's a dirty word. Now it's been classified, of course, as some sort of a work. I was reading, some Christian apostate said repentance was definitely some sort of a legalistic work, and therefore you had to stay away from it. And on and on and on it goes. So I guess you can't be surprised in a lot of ways why the church is where it's at and their total denial of anything that's coming. But what surprises me really a little bit, and I don't know about you, but the attitude of a lot of these prophetic ministries towards this, and some of the more well-known ones, are poo-pooing it and ridiculing it and mocking it, kind of like what Peter said, where's the promise of his coming, which is basically what they're saying. And I put out a blog today, and I made the point, well, okay, let's say nothing happens on 9/23, which is a very good possibility. We could go sailing right through and not see anything. Not likely, but it could happen. So, okay, let's say we do. We go sailing right on through it, nothing happens, and then somebody discovers a star sign for 2018. And we go through the same hoopla we're going through now. The reaction, I think, would be identical. I don't think it matters what year you pick, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, all the way through. I think the reaction would be the same reaction probably Noah got when he started building his boat. Are you nuts? It's never rained. It's never going to rain. Why are you building this vehicle of yours? Kind of like the movie, what was the name of that movie? It's recent, where the guy says the flood was going to come at 9, I can't remember the time he gave, but I think it was 9:23 or 9:22. And the reporter's sitting there saying, oh, it's 9:20, it's the 22nd day, and it hasn't happened. Awkward. And then, of course, 5 minutes later is when it actually occurred in that movie. I can't remember what the name of that was. Anyway, kind of an interesting scenario. And then this travelers thing, or passengers that you saw, why are they making these kind of movies with those kind of dates? Because they're all pointing to the same thing.
Yeah, it's actually that was J.E. Colger sent that to me, the author that wrote a couple of books recently. We had her on the radio show.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she found that and forwarded it to me, and I sent it to you. But what's interesting, Stuart? It's like it's like so much of the church out there. They believe in Psalm 1 and 3, but they never heard of Psalm 2. And that's really the basis for what's going on the planet right now. But you couldn't get anybody to talk about it if you wanted to. How many radio shows have we done and tried to get people to talk about it, and they don't respond? I mean, just simply don't respond. It's like it's not in the Bible, and I better look again because maybe it's not anymore. But I was going to mention, Stuart, and see what you thought of this. After it's kind of humanity. The book of Ecclesiastes says poor humanity goes the same way all the time. It does the same mistakes over and over, which we call that insanity, but nobody learns. But anyway, after Y2K, a lot of preppers quit prepping. They gave up. And then after 2012, a whole lot more preppers quit prepping, and they gave up. Now we're into this 9/20, the August 21st eclipse, and we're into this, the tetrads, all before that, and we got all these signs, but really nobody seems real interested.
Do you suppose this is a sifting process? I mean, you can find out a lot about people by doing exactly this. And the ones who are the steadfast ones, the ones who will not give up. When nothing happens, go back to the drawing boards. How did we miss this? What did we miss? What's in the scriptures we did not see? And they go back and they start studying over again. The rest of them just give it up and walk away. And so it does, I think there's a point to maybe why all this has been happening. And in the Habakkuk, however you want to pronounce it, he does say that although the vision tarries, wait for it, it shall surely come to pass. And maybe that's where we're at. Getting to that, they spotted the first sliver of the moon in Jerusalem on the 21st.
Oh, okay.
Now, secularly, or the dates given in the calendar, are the 20th. Didn't happen. It happened on the 21st. So we got kind of an interesting dilemma. Would that be considered a one-day delay corresponding to a 1-year delay from where we are?
Well, with that and what's going on in America and around the world and Donald Trump, Cyrus or whatever, could he last another year and delay what they have planned? Could he fight them for one more year? I don't know. But, you know, it's very interesting you brought that up, because if by chance that is an actual one-day delay, it could mean that a lot of the events literally transpire in real time in 5778 or 2018. And, of course, 5778 started already in Israel.
Yes. Yeah, they probably officially have already entered in. Well, I don't know. I don't know when they blow their last trumpet, because that's a 2-day affair. So whenever the end of the 22nd comes over there, that's when the last trumpet would be blown. And then it depends on whether the Lord replies with his own trumpet blast. Because if he does, then it's over. Church age is done, church is removed, and the world enters into a time of horrible trouble. So this is kind of what we're waiting for, is to see. Because sudden destruction is a very interesting term. And remember when Jesus said, when you see all these things converging, know that I am at the door. And a door is a portal. It's a dimensional portal. And a dimensional portal can open up anytime, instantly. So it's kind of interesting, because it comes out of the blue. In other words, has he already given us all the signs he's ever going to give us? And because we're not just sure about it, or we're not even watching, that doesn't slow up his plan. So this is going to be very, very fascinating, I think, all the way through to the 30th. And I was reading something where they say on a special jubilee, or super jubilee, I guess that's what they call it, at least in one occasion in Ezekiel, it says that trumpets was actually 10 days later on atonement.
Huh. Oh.
So we could go sailing through the 923 and get to atonement, and boom. Can you imagine, though, the hoopla of the gainsayers against people like Scotty Clark and the others that are on the internet telling everybody 923, get ready, it's going to happen, and it doesn't. Boom. They would come out with their swords to cut these people apart. What do you think?
Well, they might. Well, I think they might even name them fake news. I don't know.
Well, that's good. That's a good scenario. I want to read a poem, and I want to know what you think about it. It's called Smiling Serpents. And the only reason I bring it up is somebody told me that they had been told smiling serpents. They were looking ahead to see what all of this was going on. Okay, so here's what it is. What man has seen a serpent smiling, promising that it poses no harm as long as you join its ways? Is it not how humanity lost its innocence? Is it not its skillful seduction to make us believe we are one with it? I tell you, friend, I urge you to listen for the smile of a serpent. It is beautiful and convincing if you want it to, and it will never bite you until you expose its reality. What man has seen a serpent smiling? Why do you think it finds joy in a human being? Do not fool yourself. It hates you, slithering with great 2 feet up your heart. The basic eminence of your smile it brings out in all sincerity. Your trust will be dependent on how previous blind men handled it. They were fools, but you are not. And when it sees that you know the truth, the poison under its teeth will be showered on your face. What man has seen a serpent smiling? None of us in this place are friends. The trusting will be killed by the custodians, and foolishness will be exposed. Well, maybe not foolishness, but utter ignorance. The thing that struck me was the trusting will be killed by the custodians. And there's several people on YouTube talking about Houston and talking about Florida, that they are, in fact, killing people down there. In fact, one of them was down there. He's a Texas, part of the Texas militia. And he's got something up on YouTube to just curl your hair of how the government is deliberately trying to kill off a whole bunch of people. And then there were some kids who were out on bikes or whatever and discovered looks bigger than a football field full of these big, I guess you could call them cement coffins. Have you seen that picture?
I saw, what they were talking about. I don't know what it is, and really on the, reports of, I really have no way to vet any of the data coming out of a lot of these people. Yeah, you cannot vet it because the sources are not, vettable.
Yeah. We only have some eyewitness reports, and, they can plant those, I guess, if they want to. But this guy that was down there says the death toll is in the thousands. It's not in the 50s or 60s like they're constantly trying to say. And what was that hurricane that struck Florida a long time ago? Well, not such a long time. Andrew. Yeah, there were people down there who said that the death toll there was 5, 6, 7,000 people. But the official death toll, I think, was like 60. And so there is something going on. We know that the gladiators of the New World Order want a depopulation agenda. The question is how long is the Lord going to let that happen before he decides to depopulate the elite? You know what I mean? You almost always get back what you give. Getting off that, government radiation storm warning. Now, this is from this last group, but listen to what they said. Massive solar flares extremely intense, very significant events, and the scientists are bewildered.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? I would think, do they know something we don't at this point?
Well, I do know that they have been, NOAA and Space Weather have been running tests, for a couple of years on the radiation up where the airplanes fly. And, of course, they're very concerned. And now, with radiation coming all the way down to the surface of the planet, they say it's 4 times as high up in the atmosphere. And they're really telling a lot of people that are elderly or sick or pregnant women, don't fly. Just simply don't fly. It's getting that dangerous.
That's kind of one more sign, I guess. I mean, we've got, and the earthquake situation. Stan posted, I know you post all of them, but something like 9 or 12 big quakes in the last few weeks.
Yeah, and let me tell you this, Stuart, and get your opinion on it, because I've read about what Stan and others have said about the USGS, erasing earthquakes. Listen, today I saw it in real time. There were some almost 2 6s off the coast of Ferndale, California. And I actually posted both of them. You can see it on my post today. And there were a number of earthquakes in Ferndale, California, offshore there. And as I was actually handwriting the data down on paper, on notes, to post it, I saw some of them begin to update and disappear. So I astonishingly watched big earthquakes vanish off the west coast of the U.S. like they never were there. But, hey, I got the coordinates. I know what I was seeing, and I wrote the data down. And about half of what they had put up, they took down. So we're having storms off the coast of California that's not being reported.
Well, what you suffered was the Mandela effect.
Yeah, not only wasn't in a book. It was real live time on my computer.
Yeah. I got a feeling maybe like Stan was thinking possibly California could be next. And then we've got that possibility that's on that $100 bill, I think it is, when you fold it a certain way. It shows this guy, I can't think of his name, but he's really good. He's really sharp. He was an artist for years. But he discovered all of this stuff that is on the $1 and $50, $10, $5 bills. I don't remember the denominations, but the Hoover Dam breaking is on one. Oklahoma City is on another, and it shows exactly how Oklahoma City, when they blew that Murrah building, it's 100% accurate on money, which was issued long before that was done. And it makes you wonder about the time travel. We should get into that a little bit. The Pegasus project, DARPA, that was a defense operation. And they were evidently, according to a guy that was involved in it when he was little, said that they used children. And they would send them backwards or forwards in time to observe. They couldn't interfere, but they could observe. And it makes you wonder, how were they able to do this so accurately? The Twin Towers, it's absolutely accurate to the buildings. Which one was hit at the high level, which one was hit at the lower level, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they've got the Hoover Dam breaking, and they also have what appears to be, they layer this. I'm not sure exactly how they're doing it, but he split it apart. You see a missile come in, an explosion, and then a tsunami coming into New York. And it's very, very eerily close to, what was that movie where the buoys all changed, and it got cold. Day after tomorrow.
Oh, day after tomorrow, yeah.
Very similar to that, because they had scenes of that in New York. Remember? The water coming in, coming up over the buildings. So how are they able to do that? Is this remote viewing of the future? Possibly. Have they learned to do that, or are they actually involved? And has DARPA made this Pegasus project, which they probably renamed, into something else, and it's much more further advanced than we know?
Yeah,
what do you think?
I think Standeo indicated that they were years ago operating in that realm, and so, you know, it makes you wonder where all these time travel movies came from. And one of the most recent ones, one Augusto told me about a couple of months ago, called Timeless. They've got a new one out, and where they actually travel in time. So it's
called Timely. Well, you remember the movie Deja Vu?
Oh, absolutely.
And how that looked very much like CERN. That was kind of a CERN thing that they put the guy into and sent him back into the past. That was a very interesting movie, because the date 9/23 showed up, and it was just at the beginning of a terror attack. So it's almost like they've known about this for a long time. They know what their plans are. They know exactly when they're going to do it. And I guess the only thing is whether the Lord allows them to do it or not. It's kind of like he threw a monkey wrench in 2015. I'm convinced that the Queen and the Pope both said something about your last Christmas, which would indicate they felt sincerely that things were going to change in 2015, and Christmas would no longer be celebrated. But unfortunately, the Lord threw a monkey wrench into it, and along comes Donald Trump, who kind of snarled up their little affairs. So I don't know. What's going on with this Trump coup? It seems like to me he's not doing too well right now.
Well, no, Deep State has him surrounded and boxed in, but he does stay ahead of them a little bit, and it's continuing. I was going to ask you, too, I wanted to mention real quick, you know, you've been writing some blogs on the Mothman. Did you look at my latest blog today?
I did see that, yeah.
What did you think of that? That was ancient art that is in the Boston Museum that depicts a biped reptilian
with wings
creature, and it looks so much like descriptions of Mothman that's been being seen in Chicago. You know, it's real close in description wise.
Very close. In fact, I think that's probably a correct interpretation of it. And, of course, you know the Native Americans have what they called, and I don't know if it's the same creature, but they call it the Thunderbird.
Yeah.
Now, maybe the Thunderbird is different, but I remember Riddle claiming that the Thunderbird was going to reappear. And we had, I think he died, but he was a subscriber to our Global Report in Borderlands. And he called up and said he had just seen 2 of these huge birds fly over his barn and silo. He estimated the wingspan was probably around 30 feet.
Wow.
That's a pretty big bird.
Yeah.
There were 2 of them. So these things are around. There's no question about it. But this Mothman business in Chicago, you've sent up several new sightings. This is continuing, which makes me wonder about this big earthquake in Chicago. And you know, a lot of people have had the vision of the Great Lakes actually basically emptying out, or mostly emptying out into the Gulf of Mexico and wiping out everything to the south. And, of course, every time you see, I was reading an article where Mothman was seen in Chernobyl before the nuclear meltdown.
That's right.
Mothman was seen in Minneapolis, St. Paul, just before the I-35 bridge collapsed. Mothman was seen in Port Pleasant before that bridge collapsed. That was some time ago. In fact, there's a movie on that one. Stephen Gere, Richard Gere, plays in that one. It's a very good movie, by the way. People should watch it. And we've got all these kind of weird paranormal things beginning to happen. Have you heard any more on UFO activity other than the fact that it's obviously increasing all over the world?
Yeah, I did. Matter of fact, I had a show earlier in the day with Augusto Perez, and he indicated that his son, who is in the Marines, and I'm not going to say where he's based, but had a lot of night vision equipment, and told him that they had been observing fleets of UFOs going across the sky. And so there really is a lot of activity going on. By the way, I was going to tell you, they've got people coming from England and Ireland and Canada and Australia and everything else up here, I don't know, 30, 40 miles from where I'm at. And, of course, I'm in the middle of nowhere. That's what they call it. And they're coming up here going on Bigfoot hunts, and the local paper did an article on them a couple of days ago because some of the women said that they are now being, when they go out at night and try to hunt for tracks and things, that there's some large shadowy creatures have been stalking them. And, well, I could have told them that. I've seen one of those things up here right by the house. I mean, but, of course, they don't ask me anything.
Well, I think you're going to see a whole lot more of that. Yeah, go ahead.
I think we're going to see a lot more. And Augusto Perez, he's had dream visions of the fact that these things are going to be loosed. And, of course, Red Elk talked about some of these things coming loose, coming out. He said some came from portals and some come from underground. So I think we're in the season of that revealing of these things. I think they are beginning to be more prevalent.
Well, there are more and more reports, too, of Bigfoot sightings or weird creatures, Wolfman, the thing that kind of walks on all, not on all fours, but upright, and has kind of a wolf head. And that's been seen by many, many people.
Augusto has had one walk in front of his house and almost like dance around on 2 feet in front of his house and walk on off. So him and his wife, they've seen it. It's not like you're just hearing reports that you can't vet. I know these people. You know them. I mean, we've talked to them. And,
yes.
And even people that we know now are beginning. And, of course, the couple that lives close to Tallahassee, Oklahoma, friends of yours, they're seeing weird stuff out there.
Yeah, it's almost like, well, you're kind of in a portal area. Then you've got that Heavener thing where you were investigating for a number of years. Is there any more news on that? I noticed you posted something about a new wall has been found.
Well, that's the wall that's under Heavener, under that coal mine. I'd sent you a video, with that information.
Yes.
And but they've also found rock writing now in around Poto. It's supposed to be in the museum in Poto. I've got to go look at it. It seems the translation indicates that Poto down in the valley of those mountains, which is close to Heavener, is actually called or interpreted as Sundial Valley. Isn't that interesting?
Sundial Valley. Well,
yeah,
of course, that's the way they would.
Yeah, she looked up sundials and Egypt and other places like that, how valleys with sundials. It's something to do with time.
Yes. It's the easy way to tell time. Actually, I've got a couple of sundial models. And actually, yes, you can tell time very accurately with it. The ancients weren't as stupid as everybody's being taught, but they have to cover up their tracks and pretend that mankind somehow is accelerating upwards to join the gods that are soon going to rise. Speaking about that, Stan did an excellent job on the reinterpretation of Daniel and the arrival. And these guys are not going to be fun. And I'm wondering, do you think that this star sign is a two-headed affair? By that I mean the Christians would interpret it one way, but the occult would interpret it another. The Christians would interpret it as Jesus coming back to get them, whereas the occult would interpret it as an arrival, which the Bible speaks about an arrival in several places.
Well, we know, Stuart, that star signs, the writing in the heavens, so to speak, by the planets and the moons and the stars, etc., that the Creator put them there for a purpose. And apparently the star sign is for humanity, and we've got different groups that takes the same sign different ways and interpret it different ways, but it's there as it is. In other words, when it happens just like every human on earth sees it, but they all interpret it in a different way.
Different way, yeah. Well, of course, that's why we have so many denominations and fights within any religion. Doesn't matter what religion it is, they all fight it out. Like Islam, they're fighting it out. Christendom, we're fighting it out. I don't know. It seems like it's just, how do I say, diversionary tactics to keep people from doing what they're supposed to be doing. But it does seem like we're headed for a lot of trouble, folks. I guess my attitude is I don't know what's going to happen on 9/23. I don't know if anything's going to happen. But the odds are, with all of the signs, not only in the heavens but on earth, and the mathematics behind all of it, this is serious. Something is coming, and it's not going to be good for humanity. I guess that's how I'd word it. What would you say about that, Larry?
Well, I would just have to reiterate what Stan said last night on the interview, that he thinks that this sign is such a serious sign that maybe within weeks or a few short months right after this sign, the arrival will occur.
Yeah. And his research on the arrival, folks, these people that are coming, they are not pleasant. Let's put it that way. We're going to go back to the days of Noah. We're going to go back to that arrival that occurred back then. And all of a sudden in the skies, these UFOs showed up, they descended to Earth, and they landed. So this is going to get really, really interesting. Part of the strong delusion, I guess. Well, thanks a lot, Larry, for coming on. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, on Twilight Zone, the arrival was with a cookbook to serve man.
Yeah, and I think that's what that poem is all about. The smiling serpent is obviously Satan, and he's seducing the human race into the strong delusion. And we already know it's going to work. You can't go into a museum that doesn't teach evolution. And I should get into that sometime, but if you have evolution, you don't need a Messiah. You're exactly where you're supposed to be on the scale of evolution. You only need a Messiah if you've fallen, and humanity just doesn't want to admit it's fallen. So anyway, thanks a lot, Larry, for coming on. And I guess my final warning to everybody is keep your heads up. We don't know. It could all be different by tomorrow night. Different in such a different way that it will be astounding to the planet. But we don't know, so we just have to watch and see. It's all based, a lot of this, on interpretation of Scripture. Anyway, good night, everybody, and thanks for listening, and we will see you next week, if the Lord is willing. Good night.